Thank you very much. Hey guys, here I am again with my good friend Axel, talking about a topic and a place that's actually right around the corner from me. Axel, we'll talk about that in a moment. Yes, I once considered Michel Friedmann one of the main enemies in my life who has now been disinvited. From my perspective, I had to and was allowed to radically change my way of thinking about him. Yes, Axel disinvited fear of right wing protests. Has Michel Friedmann been disinvited right here around the corner in Mecklenburg-Vorpommern? But first, greetings to you, Axel, my friend.
Glad to be here, though it's another sad topic. But that's probably inevitable for a channel that deals with extremism, racism, and exclusion. But those are really sad news that reach you. So you have to say you can have your own opinion about Michel Friedmann. The man deserves criticism, but he also has a combative side. The enemy image we had of him before is not justified at all. And I am grateful that with this brave, courageous writer, we have someone who always stands up for democracy, for human rights, against racism, against anti-Semitism, against totalitarianism. And he is a very, very important and significant voice here in Germany as well. And it's actually a scandal that this man was then disinvited at the mayor's instruction. Yes.
Yes, it's true. Michel Friedmann repeatedly confronts his past. I don't even want to mention the name he once had, Paulo Pinkel, even though it's part of him. There was a scandal back then. He is often reduced to that. People talk about it very openly. Yes, even Michel Friedmann has the right to have made a mistake. Everyone has a right to that, a right to change. Yes. And he admitted it, publicly apologized for it, and at the time also resigned from his positions. Right, yes, that's what I mean.
I think he still had his positions then, I'm not even sure. In any case, he definitely scaled back his media work a lot and withdrew from the public. No, I mean, of course it was a big deal back then. Of course, there were also corresponding accusations from women's rights organizations that he was allegedly involved with forced prostitutes. That was a big deal back then, of course. Well, you have to say he's married to the well-known television host Bärbel Schäfer. Yes, she forgave him. And I think if his wife, who is closer to Michael Friedman as a person than any of us could ever be, forgives him, then we should also be generous enough to say, okay, we can forgive as well. So we shouldn't be more papal than the Pope. And I think it's a real shame that this little issue is always singled out as if there were nothing else.
Exactly, as if these mistakes define the person. Here it says, he was deputy chairman of the Central Council of Jews in Germany 2000-2003, editor of Jüdische Allgemeine and president of the European Jewish Congress 2001-2003, who resigned from all public offices during the Friedman affair.
Okay, but that also shows greatness. Saying you must act to prevent harm already demonstrates that.
Just to spare organizations from having to justify themselves is already bad enough. But that's not what this is about. Actually, it's only about one thing here. It's about his religion. Just that Michel Friedmann is Jewish makes him a major enemy to right-wing extremists. Michel Friedmann, like me, has also been mentioned in some right-wing extremist songs by now. Michel Friedmann, like former chairman Ignaz Bubis, has often been targeted by right-wing extremists in lyrics and music, serving as a key enemy figure for them.
An object of hate, yes, but he is also someone who is very courageous, yes, who likes to be uncomfortable, yes, who also speaks out. For example, as a longtime Christian Democratic Union member, he left the party after the Christian Democratic Union voted together with the AfD amid great protest. And he always expresses this very clearly, very sharply, very pointedly. Of course, that makes it easier for people who are already bothered by him, his religion, or his cosmopolitan attitude to hate him even more. Of course, that creates an enemy image that is gladly taken up because he is also someone who is very outspoken and also very uncomfortable himself.
Axel, we have an article here from Die Zeit. It's from today, the 22nd September 10:45 Ante Meridium that you found for us, and we can see here Michel Friedmann reportedly disinvited due to concerns about right-wing protests. But we are actually inviting you, Axel, to present this article to us.
Sure. The article is from Die Zeit. At 10:45 a.m., so barely 3 hours later, we pick it up and comment on it. Let's see someone else try that, right? But in the text, the publicist, Michel Friedmann, was supposed to talk about democracy at the Literature House in Klütz. Now, the appearance was apparently cancelled, probably out of fear of right-wing protests. The publicist, Michel Friedmann, was apparently disinvited from a planned event in Klütz by order of the city. According to the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, Friedmann was supposed to appear at the local literature house in October 2026. Uwe Jonsson was supposed to speak about democracy on the occasion of the 120th birthday of Hannah Arendt. Uwe Jonsson. For those who don't know him, he is also a very important writer in Germany's post-war history. He was a member of the so-called Group 47, in which young writers came together at that time to raise literature after the Second World War to a different, new level. With their meetings, that was a very, very significant gathering of old and young writers. And I just said young, but of course there were older ones there as well. And up into the 1960s, that was actually very influential for the literary scene in Germany. He was truly a very significant personality. Yes, of course.
Of course, another personality is mentioned here as well, Hannah Arendt, one of the greats.
Exactly. Jonsson was friends with her. Hannah Arendt is a woman I admire very much. So all her work.
Good recommendation.
Everyone who deals with extremism, radicalization, or even just the nature of people and politics in general should have read research on totalitarianism. So really, really great works, really great books. She did wonderful research on totalitarianism and was also a wonderful writer beyond that. I'm a huge fan.
Yes, very important works, Hannah Arendt. I'm sorry, I just looked up Uwe Jonsson. I wanted to have a picture of him. Yes, Hannah Arendt is essential reading for anyone studying extremism or fascism. Yeah, it's been many years since I read it. I said before the stream that I should really go through it again sometimes. Sometimes rereading a book makes it feel completely different and more intense. At least that's how it is for me sometimes, especially with books that have really influenced me. Yeah, then I got really triggered. That's not Klutz or Klütz, it's Klütz. That's how we say Klütz.
Klütz, sorry.
That's how we say it in northern Germany. I kept thinking about where I was corrected. By the eel from Mantel. Because I always said Mantel. He says it's called Mantel. He comes from Mantel, and we northerners just call it Mantel. It varies by region, but here in northern Germany we say Klütz. It's about 30 kilometers from me. To put that in perspective, it's important. That's what makes this format special. We always share personal experiences. Klütz is just around the corner from Gemelli, the Nazi village. Sven Kruger, Klütz, Mecklenburg-Western Pomerania. Yeah, well, I guess that's what I'll call it. I don't want to offend Klütz because I've already been invited there, but that's just how it is. That area, especially around Gemelli, is very much shaped by it, with a lot of right-wing extremism finding fertile ground there. And that wasn't a surprise for me. I had already heard about it this morning and thought, well, that's the seed that's sprouting there.
But I also find the timing interesting. So just to make it clear again, we're not talking about an event next month or this year in October, but only next year. And now, more than a year in advance, a disinvitation is being issued on the mayor's orders out of fear of right-wing protests which haven't even had a chance to manifest yet. I think that's a completely wrong, a very dangerous signal. Because actually, it would be the job of a mayor, a representative of politics, and also representatives of civil society to say, even if we fear that, this event in honor of one of the most important researchers on racism and one of the most important Democrats in post-war history, Hannah Arendt, whose 120th, we can't celebrate the birthday there as planned because we're concerned about right-wing protests. Then it's time for us to raise the flag of democracy even higher and say we won't let ourselves be restricted here. We won't let anyone ruin our event here. Definitely not out of preemptive obedience. Because honestly, put yourself in your old self's shoes for a moment. Back then, if you had been active in Klütz as a neo-Nazi and heard that an event was cancelled without you even having to lift a finger, we would have
opened a bottle of champagne.
that's already been celebrated. We
Would have said, now we have the authority over culture here. We can decide here which performances, which bands come here. We can put on pressure. Unbelievable. But something should be happening in the background.
They don't act, decide, or even protest. Then people get scared and cancel the event. Instead, it's like, oh, look, the mayor is doing it without us having to say anything. He had a telepathic connection. Look at that. I mean, that's outrageous. That's really outrageous.
Please, Axel.
So let's continue. Yes, well, he was supposed to be at the event for the 120th birthday of Hannah Arendt to talk about democracy. But the new director of the House, Oliver Hinz, had to withdraw the invitation on the mayor's orders, according to the newspaper. This was justified partly by concerns over protests from right-wing groups. Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung reports Hinz announced the cancellation in a press release. He was especially annoyed that an event honoring Arendt, a close friend of Uwe Jonsson, was limited due to fears of right-wing extremist reactions. The incident questions democracy's resilience in regions where right-wing networks are gaining strength. That's a valid question, but my answer may not be one I or others here will like. According to Hinz in the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, the trigger for the dispute was a longtime employee of the Literaturhaus. She told him that as long as she worked there would be no reading with Friedmann. When Hinz stuck to the invitation, the employee turned to the city authorities. Eventually, the mayor instructed him to disinvite Friedmann. At first, that just sounds like a personal issue. That an employee then went to the city administration, probably discussed it there, and as a result, the decision was made. We don't want Friedmann. That's quite something. But I think it's good that this was made public, that it wasn't just whispered about behind closed doors, but that the step was actually taken here. For Mr. Hinz to say, I'm expressing my irritation, and I would like to point out how politics intervenes in such events here.
I'll show the homepage of the Literature House here so we can get an impression of it. This is the Klütz City Library where it's included, so you can see that there's an exhibition inside. Exactly, so this is our building. That's a nice hall. I noticed a small hall set up with chairs. Where these events are then held. Yes, Axel, I can't help but feel that we don't want Mr. Friedmann here. Is it allowed to bring Israel-Palestine into this? I don't know.
I really don't know. Of course you don't know. We're in the dark here. Maybe it's also about the dark side of his past that was just mentioned. That the woman has a problem with it. Maybe she's a supporter of some pro-Palestinian events or organizations herself, for whom Friedmann is always a red flag. As a defender of Israel, as an advocate for the state of Israel, maybe she has a right-wing political attitude and says, we don't want him here, with his views on the AfD, on angry citizens, on democracy.
For me, the story here just doesn't really fit together very well. So what is it now? What about mayors from Gliz? Let's get to the point now. Did a female employee warn about Mr. Friedmann saying, but we don't want him here because of past things he said or did? Israel, now we're mixing everything together? Or is it now fear of far-right protests? Mixing both isn't right, I'm sorry. I can imagine even the fear here is fake and personal sensitivities shouldn't be shown. I don't know, so I can't interpret this myself.
That's actually something where politics would be required to speak out. But let's keep reading the article. Maybe some of our questions will be answered. AfD gets almost 40% in federal election. Although the AfD is not represented in the city council of Mecklenburg-Gliz, it received almost 40% of the votes there in the federal election. The leading force in local politics is the Independent Voters Association and Mayor Jürgen Mevius. When asked by the Lübecker Nachrichten, he did not want to comment on the matter. The current differences in and around the Uwe Johnson Literature House are internal matters and are discussed and resolved exclusively internally, Mevius is quoted as saying by the newspaper. That's very weak. It's a public issue. The question here is what's actually going on with you? And then, as a representative of politics, as a representative of the voters, the citizens, the public, to say, we're going to make this an entirely internal matter. Nothing will be shared with the outside at all, even though the other side has already announced we're making this public with a press release. That already sounds a bit like, I don't want to talk about it, otherwise I'll look stupid. Everyone stays silent to see if we can wait this out, I think.
That's exactly the wrong way. Just covering it up and hoping it resolves itself isn't enough. We shouldn't just tolerate it. We just close the shutters and ignore it. Unfortunately, that sometimes works since the world moves so fast now.
Of course, but that's why it's crucial we make this contribution and directly address the issue. But it goes even further. Besides concerns over protests, Hinz said Friedmann's appearance was also seen as incompatible with Klütz. Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung reported Friedmann planned to arrive by car service and stay overnight at a Hamburg hotel. The expenses and the significantly reduced fee, which would have been fully covered by private sponsors, apparently played no role for the decision makers. That's already awesome. So the city itself doesn't have to pay anything, so you can't say, oh, the costs just don't fit, it doesn't work, we have 5 other holes we need to fill. So private sponsors are saying that they'll cover the cost for Mr. Friedmann's appearance and his stay. But that doesn't matter, it just doesn't fit with Klütz. I think that's quite a bold statement. Yeah, I agree.
I have to say, it's clear to me that Michel Friedmann can't find accommodation in a hotel in Wismar. I'm sorry, but we're still discussing Michel Friedmann. He's targeted by both right-wing extremists and Islamists. Of course he wants to go to Hamburg. It is. It's no surprise he won't go to a guest house in Klütz. It's about safety, not arrogance. We're talking about Michel Friedmann. Yes, we're talking about...
So, Philipp Schlafer, honestly, not to sound arrogant or anything, we also have to see where we can stay. If you're not in a residential area, sometimes there are hotels nearby. Dude, this is the comradeship meeting point. They're sitting there in the pub, so it definitely wouldn't go well for us if we were seen there. Like, oh, he's here at the hotel, he's in that room. Yeah, so it has nothing to do with fantasy or showing off that someone would rather spend the night in the safer Hamburg instead of here, especially in that area with 40% AfD voters where he's viewed as an enemy and openly supports the Independent Voters Association. He just doesn't fit in with us, he should stay where he comes from. He's not a Gluser, we don't want him here. That's the kind of talk that gives expression to it.
Not being too short is also something for me. I don't know, I'm sorry, a cultural center?
Well, I would have asked why, because he's of Jewish faith, because he has a more upscale lifestyle. Why doesn't he fit with Klütz? He uses a driving service since age is a safety concern, ensuring he travels safely.
Yeah, but who decides who doesn't fit where? Who decides that? So we shouldn't forget, these cultural centers are also funded with taxpayers' money. If you know that, then someone from Mecklenburg can't claim, now there's only Mecklenburg money here. That's not true. There's also money from Bavaria, Baden-Württemberg, and Hesse.
Guys,
what's the purpose of state financial equalization? Yeah, but even a mayor has to say what's going on there.
Philip, that argument doesn't hold up. That would at least be tactically smart if they had said something like, yeah, the costs coming our way just don't add up. Many people would say, oh, I don't care, we could use that money elsewhere. But not a single cent of cost is coming to the municipality or the state of Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, right? Private sponsors are funding the event, covering Michel Friedmann's fee, transportation, and hotel stay. And the man is even he has reportedly lowered his fee expectations significantly. So what kind of argument is that? He can charge whatever he wants if others are willing to pay. If someone offered me $1 million and said, hey, Axel, it's still hot, I'd say, great, I'll take it. That could fund my work on extremism. But what does that have to do with the city if it doesn't have to cover the costs? Well, that's definitely something that leaves a bad taste, in my opinion. But on to the last paragraph. Friedmann himself responded cautiously in the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung. He said he had received little information about the cancellation so far, But stressed, he still wants to perform in East Germany, even if demand is lower. I am willing to be persistent, said the publicist. That's how people know him. It's a great attitude, not letting yourself be affected or restricted by it, but instead saying, here I come, even if you don't want me. Especially then, it's important to break through the hegemony that exists there, and that topics are brought up again there which are no longer anchored in people's minds and in civil society to the same extent. That urgently needs to change.
I always want to know what mindset or attitude caused that. I often have to deal with sensitivities from far left circles and, of course, from the right as well. When we discuss Islamism, someone always feels offended, but in this case, I certainly would. Which employees have spoken up and why issues like this need to be addressed? Just saying it isn't enough for me. That's the limitation. That's also a limitation in this kind of situation. Yeah, we only do things that people like. So we don't want any friction. We don't want to stand out. We want to keep things small here. We want to be invisible. Yeah, we have our standard events, we hope that every year we'll get funding from some projects. That's just how it is. But yeah, no friction, and then it just passes me by. But no, we need friction. I was out on Friday night too, now at the lecture. I was very sharp and got feedback from a few people. Sometimes when people are extremely left-leaning, almost bordering on left-wing radicalism, then I'm very sharp, very direct, and we need this kind of friction. Afterwards, we all shook hands, talked about it, and had different opinions about it. Oh, that's democracy, yes, but to completely exclude someone, and say, I won't listen to that part, we don't want that at all, that has to be allowed too.
It's not even such a controversial topic. The man is speaking at Hannah Arendt's birthday. Yes, one of the most passionate Democrats in the history of the Federal Republic. Yes, the person who helped make Jewish life visible again is now speaking on democracy. Well then, who could have anything against that? And then to come up with such old stories. Yes, we don't like how he acts. He doesn't fit in with us. According to Klütz, what type of discriminatory statement is that? Anti-Semitism is behind that again. No one can convince me otherwise. And then not having the guts as mayor to speak plainly here, but instead, no, I won't say anything about that. We handled that internally and will fully resolve it. And yes, keep eyes, ears, and mouths closed. Yeah, when it comes to dealing with the public, that's just embarrassing. That's not the kind of representative I want for the citizens who have a right to know what happened there. And that also enables discourse so that people can come together and argue against it, saying, come on, man, what kind of ideas do you have there? Yeah, you don't speak for me, and I also want to know how you think and act here. In a question like this, yeah, which isn't insignificant, not even for Glutsch. Yeah, at the next election, yeah, I mean, I think 3 times about whether I'd vote for a guy like that again. Yeah, after what he comes up with as a justification, yes.
Axel, yeah, a lot going on in my audience. We'll have to see what comes out of it. I think what remains is that you have to look at the wound. Who's sitting there, how, and at which levels. Yeah, and which structural problems do we maybe have there, where you really have to take a closer look
and speak up right here. Respect goes out to Mr. Hintz, who made the incident public, which otherwise would have just been swept under the rug according to the wishes of those responsible. No questions, no clarification. I really appreciate that. Now, if someone asks, what can we do about it? Well, then write a nice, friendly email to the mayor and ask what's going on with that. Yes, and don't be afraid to show some solidarity and say so. Hey, Michel Friedmann was uninvited here. That's a no-go. That would have been an important event with an important topic. If the man is being uninvited, I want to know why and be able to respond. But here there's a policy of silence. And we sweep it under the rug and just accept it like that. That shouldn't be acceptable, right?
Then, Axel, thank you very much for your time. That was a very brief input on that. Otherwise, check it out. Check out the book by Axel. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Feel free to comment. Be sure to check out the book.